my identity is as your son, but I don't feel like I can claim that anymore. My identity is now in my sin. And he's filled with all of this shame. He feels no better than a slave, and so he's broken. And he needs restoration. And this is some people today too. Not all pagans are defiantly rebelling. Sometimes they're just really lost. And not all those believers or those professing believers who have strayed, not all of them are loving the sin that they're in, but some of them are done with sinning. But they're lost, and they don't know how to find their way home. And then the question is there even a way home? After all that's gone on, is there even a way home? And of course there is, because of the goodness and the love of God, because of the heart of God which seeks after the lost. And God has always been this way. You go back to the very beginning when Adam and Eve sinned in the beginning, and what did God do? But he sought after them. He came to the garden and he said, "Where are you?" Of course, knowing where they were, but he asked the question. He's seeking after them, pursuing them. And then we see it through the prophets that even as there's these words of condemnation to the people of Israel for their sin, we could even see that in Micah, there's always the other side of it, where the faithful God calls out to his unfaithful people, and he pursues them. I think of Hosea and the imagery of Hosea and his unfaithful wife, and how God used that to show his love for Israel. And then, of course, we come to Jesus and his mission, as he states it. Luke 19, verse 10, "I have come to seek and to save the lost." And that's the theme throughout these three parables. We have somebody seeking something that's lost, somebody that's seeking and searching desperately and then finding. So we come to verse 20. What a wonderful verse. "He arose, he came to his father, but while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion and ran and embraced him and kissed him." See, this right here, this is the heart of God. This is the goodness and the love of God. This is the grace of God for everyone who will confess. Maybe you would say, maybe somebody would say, is this too good to be true? Like this story, that sounds nice the way that happens, but is this really too good to be true? I have sinned for so long. Is my identity not as a sinner? Whenever we're tempted as believers to think that way, that's that shame talking, right? The guilt and the shame. That's the shame coming out. But notice verse 21. The son said to him, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." That's the confession that he made, the confession of his sin. But notice how he's not even able to get to his suggestion of how to move forward. That in the midst of his shame, all he feels is if he could be a servant, a slave, really. He doesn't even get to that. See, he's thinking, I'm going to come from this antinomian lifestyle to a legal lifestyle. If I just work hard for my dad. I know he's not dad like he could have been, but I'll just work for him. At least I'm in his home. And the father says, "No, you're not my servant, but you're my son. You were always meant to be my son, and now you truly will be my son." So the father celebrates. The father is ecstatic. The father is rejoicing. The lost has been found. My son has been found. He's come back. He's alive. But what would be the reaction, normally speaking, at this time? Verse 20 is not it. Verse 20 is not it. As the people are hearing this, verse 20 is shocking to them. I mean, the rest of it, they're with him with the story. But when they come to verse 20, how come the father's acting this way? And it's not just that it's a little unconventional, but it's more than that. It's culturally, it is inappropriate how the father acts here. How he runs and how he embraces and he so quickly wraps up the son in his arms. It's actually something looked down on. Because the culture at this time is so focused on this idea of honor and shame. We have to show honor and not bring shame to our family. So the son deeply dishonored the father. We saw that that's what he was doing as he rebelled, and he brought shame upon himself through all of his actions. And so the right thing for the father actually to do would be to acknowledge that and shame his son. But he doesn't do that. He honors his son. And by honoring his son as the way the father does, he brings shame upon himself. And he's okay with that. He's willing to do that for the sake of his son. Well, is this not a parallel to the gospel, brothers and sisters? We are not worthy. We don't deserve honor. We don't deserve anything good from God, and yet Jesus sought us. Just as the Father here seeks out his Son, running out to meet him, disregarding the shame of what he's doing because he's doing it for the Son, so also Jesus came all the way for us, setting aside all of the privileges that are rightly his in heaven, all that honor that comes with that, setting that aside, identifying with us in our shame, becoming like us, right, in every way except for sin. And then even more, taking on the weight of our sin, bearing the shame on the cross, and disregarding that. You know the verse from Hebrews 12. Disregarding it because of the glory set before him. Disregarding the shame of the cross because he knew that all that he was doing, it was for our sake. And by that, through that, he gave us a new identity then. So that we who were broken are restored. That we're no longer guilty, but we're forgiven. We're no longer estranged, but we're reconciled. We are in fact sons of God. Adopted children of God. Sons, not servants. We can fall into that trap. We can even hear a message preached, like the one that's being preached now, and say, yeah, but you don't know what I've done. I know a man who said, I'm not going to go to church because I've done too many bad things in my life. I'm a bad man. And we could have that feeling too. It's just, that's our identity. We're a sinner. I'm disqualified to be his child. Maybe I can slave for him. I don't feel as if it's possible that I have an inheritance with him, but maybe I can slave for him and I'll earn everything he gives me. But beloved, that's not grace. That's not God's grace. God's grace is greater than that. We are sons.